He built his life to control everything. But tonight, his maid was holding his children like they were hers, because when they cried out, sick and alone, he never answered. Two tiny boys, wrapped against her chest like a lifeline, while the man they belonged to stood frozen in his own home. The elevator doors whispered open into the private Atlanta penthouse, polished, pristine, and cold. Michael Davies stepped inside, luggage still in hand, the scent of jet fuel clinging to his suit. He hadn't told a soul he was coming back early. He never did. Because control wasn't something he shared, it was something he enforced. And tonight, he just wanted silence, stillness, the order he'd built his empire on. But from the kitchen, a sound interrupted everything. A lullaby, soft, hummed, followed by the gentle coo of babies. Michael's brow furrowed. His penthouse was supposed to be empty, cleaned, maintained, not lived in. He dropped his bag and moved toward the kitchen, each step sharper than the last. And there, under the soft track lights and skyline reflection, stood Angela Chapman, 27 years old, orange uniform, yellow gloves still on, and strapped to her chest were his sons, Matt and Max, 2 years old, sleeping, breathing unevenly, one of them burning with a fever. Michael stopped cold, his voice cut through the room like glass. "What the hell is this?" Angela didn't jump, didn't apologize. She just looked up. They were sick. The nanny left. They wouldn't stop crying. Her tone was even, but her eyes, they carried hours of exhaustion and something more, conviction. Michael stared at her, at his sons, trying to process the scene in front of him. The sling, the closeness, the quiet breathing against her heart. He hadn't touched them in days, hadn't known they were ill, hadn't even checked. Everything about this was wrong. His rules, his boundaries, shattered. She wasn't family, she wasn't supposed to hold them. And yet, they looked safe, calmer than he'd seen them in weeks, held. For a moment, barely a breath, something stirred deep inside him. A flash. Of fevered nights in his own childhood, of calling for help in a house full of people, and no one coming. He swallowed hard, but the knot in his throat didn't move. Angela stood in front of him, not defiant, not afraid, just present, and holding the two most fragile parts of his life, like someone who'd already chosen to care when he hadn't. But before we begin, tap that subscribe button, like this video, and let me know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. I hope this story reminds you that real love doesn't need permission. It just shows up. He hadn't meant to come home tonight. The Zurich deal closed early. The jet was already waiting, and for once he didn't feel like smiling for cameras in Paris. Michael Davies just wanted quiet. Instead, he walked into a storm he didn't see coming. Angela stood completely still. The babies were tucked tight against her. Sweat dampened their curls, their cheeks flushed with fever. Michael's voice came again, lower now, but no less sharp. "Where's the nanny?" Angela didn't blink. Gone. Walked out. No note. Just left. He stepped forward, slow, deliberate. His eyes flicked to the boys. One of them whimpered in his sleep. Angela shifted her stance to cradle him. Michael's hands curled into fists. "You weren't hired to play mother," he said. "No," she replied. "I was hired to clean floors, but I found them screaming, burning up, alone." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She just said the truth out loud. And it landed harder than a scream ever could. Michael moved past her and into the nursery. He flicked on the light. It was a mess. Half-eaten baby food, unopened medicine, a monitor blinking red. The nanny's phone still charging in the corner. No explanation, no plan. Just absence. He turned slowly, jaw tight. "You should have called me." Angela stepped into the doorway, still holding the boys. "I did, 3 times. Left voicemails. No response." He looked away, the weight of it settling in. Silence stretched thin between them. Only the sound of Max's soft breath broke through. Angela rocked slightly, instinctively. Michael noticed how the child relaxed into her without hesitation, without fear. That trust, it wasn't built overnight, and he had no idea when it began, or worse, how long it had taken to form without him. "You had no right to touch them," he said, barely above a whisper. Angela's grip didn't loosen. "They needed to be held." Her voice cracked, just for a moment. "I wasn't thinking about rights, Mr. Davies. I was thinking about fevers and silence and what it means to cry with no one coming." That last line hit deeper than she probably intended, because he remembered it too, being 5 years old, curled up in a cold room, body burning, calling for his father, and only hearing the echo of his own voice. Michael cleared his throat, straightened his spine. The warmth rising in his chest felt foreign and dangerous. Angela stepped forward, slow, careful. "If you're going to fire me," she said quietly, "do it now, but just know I didn't hold them to overstep. I held them because someone had to." Matt stirred. Tiny fingers curled around the collar of her uniform. Angela glanced down, didn't flinch, didn't ask for forgiveness. Michael looked at the boy's hand, then back at her, and for a breathless second, the room held still. He didn't fire her. He didn't say a word. He just turned and walked out. The door didn't slam. It clicked softly shut, but it echoed like thunder down the hall. Michael didn't sleep, not because of noise, but because of silence, a silence that echoed louder than any argument. He stood in the dark hallway outside the nursery, listening to their breaths, to hers, and to the voice in his head saying, "You weren't there." By morning, the twins were quieter. Their fever had dropped slightly. Angela hadn't left. She was in the kitchen when he entered, still in uniform, hair pulled back, yellow gloves tossed on the counter beside a bottle of children's ibuprofen. She didn't greet him, didn't even look up. "You should have told me sooner," he said. Angela turned slowly. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "I did. You didn't pick up." Her voice was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that came after too many nights of doing everything alone. Michael pulled a chair back from the table, sat. "Where's the nanny now?" Angela didn't move. "She quit, left a voicemail, said she couldn't handle the crying, said it wasn't worth being ignored every day." She reached into the drawer and slid her phone across the counter. The voicemail was still there. Michael didn't play it, he just stared at the screen and for a moment didn't know what to say. Angela stepped closer. "I found them soaked in sweat, Mr. Davies, screaming. Their diapers hadn't been changed in hours. The monitor was on mute. The nanny's things were packed before she left." Her voice didn't rise, but her eyes burned. "I didn't know what else to do. I held them." Michael looked down at his hands. The same ones that signed billion-dollar contracts, built towers, restructured companies with a pen stroke, hands that hadn't held his sons in over a week. "You should have waited," he said. Angela's mouth twitched, not a smile, something colder. She stepped around the counter slowly until they were eye to eye. "Would you have preferred I left them there, shaking, screaming, burning up while I polished your counters?" Her voice didn't crack, but his resolve did. He stood quickly, like he needed to shift the power back into his posture. "You crossed a line." "No," she said quietly. "I stepped in when no one else did." A long silence followed, the kind that made every breath feel like a choice. Michael turned away, walked to the window. Midtown Atlanta shimmered beyond the glass, orderly, towering, obedient, his city, but not his home, not anymore. Angela's voice came softly from behind him. "I don't need to stay. I came to get my things. I'll go after that." He didn't turn around, didn't stop her. And yet, he heard Matt's cry from the nursery, high-pitched, frantic. Angela was already moving before Michael could react. Her footsteps down the hall were soft, familiar, like she'd done it before, like she knew the way. He stayed where he was, motionless, silent, staring out over the skyline he owned and feeling something new, not anger, not power, something quieter and harder to name. Angela didn't wait for permission. She packed her things in silence. A small duffel, neatly zipped, the uniform folded, her shoes placed side by side at the door. She didn't ask if she was fired. She already knew. Michael stood in the hallway watching her through the open kitchen archway. He wanted to say something. He didn't know what. Not thank you, not sorry, not stay. Words were easy in boardrooms, not here. The twins had fallen back asleep. A nurse was scheduled to arrive by noon. The house would be clean again, quiet again, just the way he liked it. So why did it all feel wrong? Angela zipped the bag shut. Still no eye contact, still no plea. Just a woman with a steady back, doing what needed to be done. Again. Michael stepped forward, but his voice stayed behind. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was crowded, with everything he hadn't done, everything she had. Angela finally turned. You don't have to explain. Her tone wasn't bitter, just tired. You hired me to clean, not to care. I understand. He shook his head slightly, almost imperceptible. That's not what this is. She raised an eyebrow. Then what is it? He didn't answer, because he didn't know. Not yet. Angela lifted her bag, walked past him, paused at the nursery door, looked in one last time. Matt shifted in his sleep. She lingered, just a moment, then started down the hall. Michael watched her walk away, and something in his chest moved, a slow ache, like grief, but older, like it had been waiting. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he saw it again. A different hallway, marble floors, echoes of footsteps too far away. A little boy with a fever, crying into a pillow, hoping the maid would come check on him. She never did, because she wasn't allowed. He opened his eyes. Angela was at the door now, hand on the knob. She didn't turn it yet. You were right, he said quietly. She paused, still didn't look back. About what? Michael swallowed. His voice came out softer than he expected. About waiting, about crying and no one showing up. I know what that feels like. Angela turned then, slowly, her expression unreadable. But her eyes saw something he wasn't ready to show. Then maybe you understand why I did what I did. Michael nodded once, just once. But it said more than anything he'd said in days. Angela looked down, the duffel bag strap still in her hand, still unsure. She didn't move. Neither did he. The moment stretched, uncomfortable, unfinished, but not broken. And somewhere down the hallway, a baby stirred again. A soft, fragile sound, searching for something that felt like home. The door never opened. Angela stood there for a long time, hand still on the knob, her bag by her side. She didn't move, and neither did he. Michael didn't speak right away, didn't rush to explain himself, didn't offer forgiveness. What he offered was something rarer. Space. Finally, he cleared his throat. Sit down. Not an order, not a command. Just words, carried with something unfamiliar. Respect. Angela hesitated, then let go of the doorknob, walked slowly back to the kitchen, dropped her bag beside the counter, and sat. The room was still, just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant rustle of wind against the windows. Michael leaned against the counter, arms folded. Then finally he asked, "Why are you still here?" Angela met his eyes. "Because I don't walk out on people who need me." Her voice was steady, measured, but her hands, she kept them clasped tightly in her lap. Michael nodded once, then sank into the chair across from her. The silence stretched again, but this time it didn't feel hostile. It felt necessary. He tilted his head slightly. "Where are you from?" Angela blinked, caught off guard by the question. "Haven't been asked that in a while." Michael waited. She exhaled slowly, like she wasn't sure where to begin. Small town outside Macon, dirt roads, one stoplight. My mom worked night shifts at the diner, then cleaned houses during the day. She paused. I was the oldest, so when my siblings got sick, I stayed home. Learned how to sponge fevers before I learned algebra. Michael's eyes softened. Angela continued, voice quieter now. Got a scholarship to Clark Atlanta. Made it halfway through before my mom's kidneys started to fail. She couldn't work. I dropped out. Took every job I could find. She looked down at her hands. Cleaning was the only thing I didn't need a degree for. Michael swallowed but said nothing. Angela glanced at him. People think being a maid is just mops and bleach, but sometimes it's holding a child who won't stop crying, or staying late so the mother can cry alone in her room without guilt. She looked away again. It's not just floors, Mr. Davies. It's knowing how to be invisible, and when not to be. Michael stared at her for a long time. This woman, who he'd barely noticed for months, had lived 1,000 quiet battles behind that uniform, and she didn't owe him a single piece of it. Yet she gave it anyway. Finally, he spoke. Your mother. Is she okay? Angela's mouth pressed into a thin line, then shook her head. Dialysis 3 times a week. She's tired. A beat. But I can't let her fall apart. She's done that for me enough times already. Michael looked at her, really looked, not at the maid, but at the daughter, the sister, the fighter, and for a man who had built walls higher than his skyscrapers. He felt something unfamiliar. Admiration. Angela stood slowly. I wasn't trying to disrespect your rules, I just couldn't leave them like that. She started to reach for her bag. Michael didn't stop her, but he didn't look away either. Behind them the twins stirred again. A soft cry echoed down the hall. Angela turned her head, waited. Michael didn't move. He just watched her. And for the first time, he wondered what it would feel like to be needed for something more than money. Michael stood in the nursery doorway. It was quiet, too quiet. 2 cribs, matching. Untouched sheets folded at the corners, bottles lined up on the table like inventory. Everything was in its place. Except him. The nurse hadn't arrived yet. Angela was gone, just for the morning, she said. But her absence echoed through the room like a missing note in a melody. He stepped inside. Slowly. Max stirred. Michael froze. The baby's eyes fluttered open, half-lidded and glassy. A soft whimper escaped his lips, then a cough, then a cry. Michael looked around like someone had triggered an alarm. No Angela, no nanny, no buffer, just him, and the weight of a child needing more than he knew how to give. He reached down awkwardly, hands stiff, lifted Max from the crib with the caution of someone handling glass. The baby cried louder. Michael cradled him, wrongly. He could feel it. Nothing about it felt natural. He sat in the rocking chair, stiff and unsteady, bouncing Max in uneven rhythm. It's okay, he muttered under his breath, more for himself than the child. You're all right. You're okay. But the baby wasn't calming, and neither was he. His shirt soaked quickly, warm against his chest. Max's skin was hot, his forehead damp. Michael panicked for a second, heart racing. Where was the thermometer? Where was the nurse? Where was the woman who made this look easy? He reached for his phone, then stopped, put it down, and looked back at Max. The baby's tiny fingers were curled into his collar, gripping him with more certainty than he felt. Something in that small hand cracked through him. Not a word, not a thought. Just a memory. A hallway. A marble floor. A smaller version of himself, wrapped in a blanket too big, calling out into silence. He hadn't known it then. But what he felt that night, that burning loneliness, that was the beginning of everything. The deals, the walls, the distance, all of it built to protect the part of him that still remembered not being held. Michael looked down at his son. Matt was stirring now too. soft cries beginning to build. For a moment he didn't know what to do. Then he stood, Max in one arm, walked to the second crib, and with far less grace than he'd like, picked up Matt. One arm for each boy, their warmth against his chest, their weight on his shoulders, their cries softening, not disappearing but changing. He sat back down, both boys pressed close. No nurse, no maid, no help, just him. For once, that wasn't terrifying. It was grounding. Matt hiccuped, then stilled. Max nestled deeper. Michael leaned back, eyes fixed on the ceiling. The silence returned. But it didn't feel empty this time. It felt full. His phone buzzed on the side table. He ignored it. Down the hall, the front door clicked open. Angela stepped in, slow and cautious, unsure of what she'd find. She turned the corner and froze. Michael didn't look up. He just kept rocking. Two boys asleep in his arms. No words. Just motion. Just effort. Angela stepped into the room, eyes soft. She opened her mouth, then stopped. Whatever she was going to say could wait. Because finally, he wasn't just holding them. He was choosing to. The boys were asleep. Angela watched from the hallway, arms crossed lightly over her chest. Michael hadn't said a word, but he didn't need to. The way he held them spoke louder than anything else. Later that afternoon, the nurse finally arrived, young, professional, emotionally distant. Angela stepped aside as she was briefed. But Michael noticed it immediately. The room didn't feel the same. The air felt thinner without her presence near the boys. He found her in the laundry room. She was folding blankets, perfectly, quietly, as if nothing had changed, but everything had. He leaned in the doorway. "Why didn't you tell me she quit?" Angela looked up, didn't pretend not to know who he meant. "I tried. You were on a plane, then in meetings, then unreachable." She said it without blame. Just fact. Michael nodded slowly, then asked the question that had been sitting on his chest since last night. "Why didn't you just let it go?" Angela paused, folded the last blanket. "Because I don't leave children crying in a room alone. Not anymore." Michael didn't push, but something about her words stayed with him. And later, in his office, glass-walled and miles above the city, he picked up his phone. "Find out what happened with the nanny," he told his assistant. Everything. The report came back within the hour. Angela had been reported, days ago, for getting too attached. The nanny had sent an email to HR, said Angela overstepped boundaries, said she warned her, said she was told to stay in her lane. Angela ignored it and held the twins anyway, even after being warned, even knowing it might cost her job. Michael read the message twice, then opened the HR logs. Sure enough, a formal warning, filed, delivered, never mentioned to him. Angela never said a word. She had taken the risk and the consequence. Also, two children wouldn't feel what she once did. Alone, unheld, unheard. He closed his laptop and just sat there, staring out at a skyline that suddenly looked hollow. He'd rewarded loyalty his entire life, with money, contracts, titles. But this was something else. The kind of loyalty that doesn't ask permission. The kind that steps into fire quietly, because it's the right thing to do. The kind that makes rules bend, because love doesn't follow protocol. A knock on the office door broke the stillness. Angela stepped in, holding a bottle of formula and a baby monitor. Matt woke up. She hesitated. "I can give him to the nurse if you'd prefer." Michael looked at her for a long time, then shook his head. "No. Bring him here." She crossed the room slowly and handed the bottle over. Michael cradled his son in one arm and took the formula in the other. He didn't ask for help. He tried, fumbled, laughed quietly under his breath. And Angela just watched. Not as a maid, not as staff, but as someone who had been there first, when no one else was. She turned to leave. Michael stopped her. Why didn't you tell me? Angela looked over her shoulder. Would it have made a difference? She didn't wait for the answer. She already knew it. The next morning, Angela arrived expecting distance, boundaries re-established, emotions reset. She was prepared to resume as nothing more than the maid, if she was still wanted at all. What she wasn't prepared for was an envelope on the counter, with her name on it. She looked around. The twins were in the nursery with the nurse. The house was still, humming faintly with morning light. She opened the envelope. Inside, a formal offer letter. Not for cleaning staff, but for household care liaison. Higher pay, clear authority, flexible schedule. And a second page, another name. Her mother. A fully arranged care plan. Transportation. Dialysis. In-home nursing. Paid for. In full. Angela didn't move for a long time. She read it again. Twice. Then heard footsteps. Michael stood in the hallway, one hand in his pocket, watching her read. No suit this morning, just a sweater. Casual, out of place on him, like someone halfway between who he was and who he might become. You said you don't walk out on people who need you. He nodded toward the paper in her hand. That offer, and that's me saying I don't either. Angela blinked, not shocked, but stunned. She set the paper down slowly. Why? Michael exhaled. Because you showed up when I didn't. And because they trust you, maybe more than they trust me. A beat. And because I don't want to keep building walls they'll have to tear down someday. Angela crossed her arms, but it wasn't defensive. It was grounding. You're changing a lot of rules. Michael gave a faint smile. They weren't working. She studied him for a moment, trying to find the catch, the agenda, the performance. There wasn't one. Just a man finally stepping into a role he had never been taught how to hold. This isn't charity, she said. I'm not a cause. I'm not broken. Michael's voice didn't waver. I know. That's why I'm asking, not offering. If you'll stay. A pause. Not as a maid, not to babysit, but to help build something better. Angela looked down. Her fingers brushed the corner of the offer letter. Matt's laughter echoed faintly from the nursery. She glanced toward the sound, then back at Michael. I'll stay, she said softly, but not to fix your life. Michael nodded. No, just to be part of it. Another silence passed between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was alive. Angela picked up the papers, tucked them neatly back into the envelope. You'll still need a real nanny, she said. Michael smiled. I need a lot of things. She turned to leave, but paused in the doorway. They'll still cry in the middle of the night, still throw tantrums, still need to be held when it's inconvenient. Michael's smile faded, but not from resistance, from understanding. Good. Angela gave him a look, one that said, we'll see. Then disappeared down the hall. Michael stood alone in the kitchen, hands in his pockets, his empire still intact, but the foundation beneath it, finally shifting. It started small. Michael didn't announce it. He didn't ask. He just showed up. First it was breakfast. He sat at the table while Angela fed the twins in their high chairs, clumsy spoonfuls and sippy cups gone rogue. He watched, silent, still. She noticed, but didn't comment. The next morning, he was the one warming bottles. Angela raised an eyebrow. He shrugged. They won't drink if it's too hot. I learned that yesterday. She didn't say, good job. She didn't need to. Days passed. Routine shifted. Michael took calls in shorter bursts, stopped checking his phone when the twins were in the room, started asking questions not about numbers, about them. Why does Matt cry before naps but not bedtime? Does Max always suck his thumb when he's tired? Angela answered without judgment, with ease, like someone who'd learned to read needs before words existed. One evening she found him in the nursery, Matt on his chest, Max curled at his side, books scattered on the floor. Michael looked up, startled. We were reading. Or I was trying. Angela didn't laugh. She picked up a board book and sat beside them. She didn't tell him what to do. She showed him how to hold the bottle differently, how to swaddle without too tight a grip, how to recognize that Max's cough wasn't a cold, it was just a dry room. Michael listened, actually listened. And slowly, he changed. One night, the boys were fussy. Angela was rocking Max in the hallway when Michael emerged from the dark, Matt already in his arms. She paused. He did too, just for a breath. Then they stood there side by side, rocking, in sync. No words, just motion, just presence. Later, in the kitchen, Angela poured herself a glass of water. Michael leaned against the counter, his voice came quiet. I used to think being present was a waste of time. She looked up. Because you were always chasing something. Michael shook his head slowly. Because no one was ever present for me. I didn't think it mattered. Angela didn't pity him. She didn't soften. She just held his gaze and said, Then maybe now's your chance to be what you never had. The words didn't pierce. They landed. Heavy. True. Michael looked down at the tile, then back up. Something unspoken passed between them. Not romance, not comfort, just understanding. Angela placed her glass in the sink. They'll wake again in 3 hours, just a warning. Michael smiled faintly. I'll be ready. She moved toward the hallway, paused. And Mr. Davies? He raised an eyebrow. She almost smiled. You're getting better. He didn't respond, but long after she left the room, he stood there. Still, letting the words settle in a place that had never held praise before. Weeks passed, but not in the way they used to, rushing forward, stacked with deals and time zones. Now, the days moved differently, measured not by meetings but by milestones, a first laugh, a new tooth, an arm reaching up for him, without hesitation. Michael's home didn't look different, but it felt it. The lights were softer. The silence was gentler, and the air no longer carried the weight of absence. One morning he walked into the kitchen and stopped without realizing why. Angela was at the table, feeding the twins. Music played faintly in the background, an old jazz record spinning low and warm. Max banged a spoon against his tray. Matt giggled, face covered in applesauce. Angela's hair was pulled back, sleeves rolled up, humming to the rhythm of the chaos. And somehow, it was beautiful. Alive. Michael stepped closer, pulled out a chair. For the first time in years, he sat. Not for business, not for obligation, just to be there. Angela looked up, gave a small nod, said nothing. She didn't need to. He watched as she wiped Matt's chin with practiced ease. He reached over to help, and for once, didn't second-guess himself. Later that afternoon, Angela's phone buzzed. A video call from her mother, smiling, color in her cheeks again. The nurse waved from the background. Michael walked by, caught the tail end of the conversation. He didn't interrupt, just listened, and quietly smiled to himself. The boys had started crawling now, which meant bruises, bumped heads, and constant supervision. Michael baby-proofed the entire living room, personally. Angela caught him rearranging outlet covers and muttered under her breath, "Control freak." He looked up. Former. They both laughed, and it stayed in the room long after the sound faded. That evening, Angela was closing the dishwasher when she turned to find him watching her. He wasn't trying to intimidate or evaluate. He was just watching. "You okay?" she asked. Michael nodded. "I was just thinking." "About what?" A pause. Then, what this house used to feel like, and what it feels like now. Angela didn't press, but she stayed, leaning against the counter, arms folded, letting the moment breathe. Michael looked around. The fingerprints on the fridge, the toys scattered on the floor, a burp cloth hanging off a chair. His past self would have fired someone for less. Now? He couldn't imagine it any other way. He ran a hand over his face, then looked at her. "You changed this place. Angela tilted her head. You let it change. Silence settled between them. Not awkward, not heavy, just still, like peace. Later that night, Michael stood in the nursery doorway. The twins slept deeply, curled against their blankets, nightlight casting soft shadows on the wall. Angela passed behind him on her way to the hall. He spoke without turning. Thank you. She paused. For what? He turned, voice quiet. For staying. Angela nodded once, then disappeared down the hall. Michael lingered in the doorway. The empire he built still stood. But now, so did something else, something soft, something real. Money built these walls, but love cracked them open. And in that light, he finally saw what mattered.